Rock'em Sock'em Robots on the Game Boy Advance. It's a fighting game with 3 moves, and I'm not exaggerating when I say you can beat every opponent using only one. And when you beat everyone, you unlock the next character so you can do it all over again. And despite the cutscenes showing different character designs, they're all just color swaps of each other, which of course means that they have the same moves and stats as well. This is practically a prototype. Super Monkey Ball Step and Roll is almost like a real Monkey Ball game, except instead of controlling it like a video game, you're forced to play it with awful motion controls or even worse balance board controls. For some reason, the game insists you hold the Wii Remote vertically, even though if you were holding it horizontally, you could hold it with both hands, which would make the controls a lot more natural. But instead of just doing that easy fix, they decided to ruin the level design. The first half is impossible to lose, and the second half is just a bunch of mazes. The only obstacle is the timer. And yes, it is quite challenging, but it's not fun. BlazBlue Calamity Trigger is a weeboo visual novel. However, going in, I thought it would be a fighting game. This has got to be the biggest cutscene to gameplay ratio I've ever seen in any game. There's so much dialogue that even if you rapidly skip the lines, there's still more time spent in cutscenes. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. The gameplay might be good, but it was all button mashing for me because the game puts no effort into teaching you how to play, which is fairly normal for fighting games. But come on, at least give me a move list. Eminem's Kart Racing. Tell me something. This is a kart racer that forces tilt controls, lacks items of any kind, has an announcer that has a worse mic than I do, saying the same thing every single lap. Sound fun? Approaching sound barrier! Because it's not. In fact, it's very boringly easy. It might have helped if I played on hard, but that would risk failure, and I didn't want to play this game for any longer than I had to beat it. It is kind of funny bad, though.
I'm the champ! You are the winner!
Open Season is also very boring, but it has some really weird difficulty spikes. You can't lose, or at least it's like that for most of the game. To follow the licensed kids game tradition, it has a lot of mini-games sprinkled in. And in those mini-games, you can lose, and some of them are actually pretty challenging. But the majority of the game is just... Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on the Sega Genesis. I button mashed for 10 minutes and it was over. As far as I could tell, there's only punching and kicking. There may be some special moves, but I might as well not even try. After all, I am playing on easy mode. Yes, I also beat this one on easy mode, I'm sorry, but doing that actually made me change my ways. I was never good at video games growing up, so I would always switch it to the easiest setting, and when I beat it and I really liked it, I would switch it to a higher setting on my next playthrough, but I'm a big boy now, I'm gonna start with normal. I mean, what if I don't like it after playing on easy mode? I don't like it so much that I don't replay it, then I would never experience how it was meant to be played. And this game made me realize that I can't be doing this forever. Playing games on easy mode. Wipeout 2 is just like the show it's based on, or more specifically, an episode of the show, because you can easily experience the entire thing in 40 minutes. And that's even including the cutscenes of the announcers that you'll inevitably skip. Hey, just like the show. This right here is all the content. This would be unacceptable even if it played well. Echo Jr. I was only 8 when I first played this, but the sheer fact that any point in my life I could not figure out how Echo Jr. works is humiliating. The game is a collectathon, and the things you have to find are... they're right there! The pictures are right there! And to make the game even easier, if you shoot your sonar in the direction you're supposed to go, the game shoots it back. When you collect all the animals, you can finally collect the level's crystal. Do this 17 more times and the game is over. I don't think you'll be needing that password system. Gremlins Gizmo is a minigame collection on the Wii featuring everyone's favorite Mogwai. You can't just select the minigames though. The overworld functions as a point and click with interactive objects the Gizmo can play with, and some of them are minigames, so just keep touching random things and you'll find them eventually. The minigames range from okay to... not. Completing minigames and even interacting with the objects that does absolutely nothing levels up your Mogwai, and when your Mogwai gets leveled up, you can unlock the next room. There is a total of 6. Can you get to them all? I beat Justice League Task Force on easy mode, which means I didn't have to implement any strategy and therefore made the game worse. I'm sorry. King of the Monsters 2 for the Super Nintendo. This is a beat 'em up that is either way too hard or way too easy, depending on if you exclusively use the jump kick again and again for the entire game. Nobody stands a chance if you do that, but you don't stand a chance if you do anything else. Wipeout on the Wii. This is better than the second one because there's bonus content after the 40 minutes. There's also funny ragdoll physics. Ocean Commander. It's a horizontal shoot 'em up for the Wii, and at first glance, this seems pretty good. It controls well, and unlike every other shooter I played, the first level actually gives you a chance with its limited enemies and slow bullets. The only problem is the game never gets any harder. In fact, it only gets easier due to the upgrades you can purchase at the end of every stage. Sure, the enemies get stronger, but they don't upgrade near as fast as you do, so even by the end of the 3rd stage, you're an unstoppable beast that plows through bosses like they're nothing. I don't even think I ever died. Pocket Bike Racer is one of the 3 Burger King games released back in 2006, and might just be the best one. It's a Mario Kart clone with 5 tracks, and that pretty much tells you the quality of the other 2. It's really more of a curiosity than anything, which can also be said for over half the games I play. Brave a Warrior's Tale is just a run-of-the-mill mediocre 6th generation 3D platformer for kids. That is until you get to the final boss. The sheer randomness of what happens baffled me to the point where I lowered its placement on this list just for it. So the story is laid out how every cartoon with Native Americans does it, meaning it's a child listening to an old wise elder tell a story, but at the point where you're at the final boss, I assumed the game forgot it was just a story. I sure as hell did. After hitting the final boss a few times, the game abruptly cuts to a loading screen. No cutscene or anything. When it's done, you appear back at the beginning area. If you walk up to the elder, a text box appears telling you to find some collectibles so we finish the story. What the actual hell? The game hasn't cut back to the real world once up until this point. And when you find the stuff, he finishes the story and you get to finish the boss. What? What was going through their heads? Alien Syndrome for the PS2 is a remake of the arcade twin-stick shooter of the same name. And let's just get this out of the way, I beat out in easy mode. Easy mode gives you unlimited continues, even though it's not like you'll ever even need to use a continue. The only way you can realistically lose if you run out of time. That's almost never an issue unless you mess around too much. Due to the game being so short, I switched it to normal mode, getting ready to beat it again, but it only gives you 3 continues on top of everything being a lot harder. Probably could do it with a little practice, but the game just ain't fun enough for me to want to try again after being sent all the way back to the beginning. It would be nice if we still had unlimited continues. Wreck-It Ralph is a bland and generic platformer. There's really not much to say. What you see is what you get. The cutscenes definitely help it be at least a little enjoyable, though.
I hate to see my beloved home like this. They're eating everything.
Hopefully Gene's Macarena records too.
Let's head over to the brick pile and work our way up the building. Oh my land.
Stunt Race FX is a clunky, choppy, but stylish polygon racer for the Super Nintendo. I really like how the game looks. Its bright colored, cel-shaded style makes it one of the best looking 3D games on the console. That, along with its iconic Nintendo-esque presentation, almost makes up for just how terribly it controls. The speed tracks are annoying enough to get through, but the stunt tracks? You're not even up against other racers. You have to hit a set number of collectibles in a very strict amount of time. If the normal races didn't make you despise the physics, then this certainly will. I have no idea how I managed. African Adventures might just be the best game with a Cabela branding, which can be said by default because it's one of the select few that aren't a boring hunting simulator. In this open-world third-person shooter, you're an unstoppable god that preys upon the helpless predators. Mindlessly blasting deadly animals that want nothing more than to be victim of your aim assist can be fun for a few missions, but its repetition really starts to show off in the first half an hour. One mission, you're shooting a lot of animals. Another mission, you're sneaking past animals to kill a specific one. Another mission, you'll fight a big boss that doesn't stand a chance with your ability to roll out of the way when it's his turn to attack. Then it's back to shooting a lot of animals again. Oh yeah, it's also open world, so that basically just means you have to slowly traverse it to get to a mission it could easily spawn you to. I'd probably be less harsh in the game if I didn't have to stream it. Beating a mediocre game in one sitting will instantly make you hate it. Nickelodeon Car Racers is the sole definition of bare minimum. It controls fine, it runs fine, not well mind you, but just good enough to not be distracting, but my god, it could not be more bland if they tried. There's not a single track or song I remember, and they didn't even bother adding any of the characters' voices. No game, I don't appreciate your dialogue box compensation. I'm not gonna look down there during gameplay. I bet you also want kids to text and drive. Family Guys, a decent beat-em-up, a mediocre platformer, and a bad stealth game. I'd imagine the Peter section's getting old after a bit, so the variety in gameplay styles was nice of them. Just be sure to give players the ability to turn off the Brian levels in the next patch. They're terrible. Wipeout Create and Crash is the final game of the franchise, and honestly, they kind of went out with a bang. I mean, at least when you're comparing it to the other games. This time around, there's a plethora of content, plenty of unlockables, set pieces, and it even has a soundtrack that has no right to be as good as it is. I mean, it's still a Wipeout game at the end of the day, but it's okay. SpongeBob SquigglePants is a WarioWare clone that uses the Wii's U-Draw game tablet, and it is definitely the best game using the peripheral, because it's actually fun. It's very enjoyable for the first half an hour, because after that, it's done. By then, you've experienced everything the game has to offer. I mean, after you beat it, there's other quote-unquote modes, but I didn't stutter. This is probably gonna ruffle some jimmies, but Uncharted 2 is not as good as the first Uncharted. This one introduces a lot of action movie set pieces, which is one of the reasons why people like it so much, but I don't. Sure, this looks cool, but it's not fun. This one also incorporates a lot more climbing, and just like the first one, it practically plays itself. I still like a lot of the gunfights, but there's a lot less of them, and for me, that makes only half the game fun. I probably expected too much after hearing time and time again about this being one of the best games of all time. 3DO Doom has the reputation of not only being the worst version of Doom, but one of the worst ports of any game. I think it's garnered up the reputation just because the story behind how the port was made, because its only flaw is its frame rate, which I know is a big problem, but if you've played as much 3DO as I have, then simply having a game as well designed as Doom be playable on it is amazing. It's weird, because the same people who say Doom is the worst FPS in the system will also call something like Killing Time an underrated gem, which runs just as badly, mind you, so if Doom running poorly is the only reason, then... Holy crap, I put this above Uncharted 2. I have a problem with letting my expectations cloud my judgment. Injustice 2 is fun, but the story sucked. I originally thought it was awesome that you could pick sides before the final battle, but when you get up to that point, you figure out that the only choices you have are being an evil dictator or a delusional hippie. There's a bit of wiggle room in the middle game, but it's fine. The game's still fun. It's just rare that a game's story bothers me as much as this one did. I didn't grow up with the show, but I was interested in Transformers Devastation because, well, it looked fun, and that it was. It has some gear, upgrade, add-on, stats BS in between levels, and my character never feels any different. Maybe it does something, but I just mostly ignored it. But the solid controls and awesome soundtrack more than make up for the useless gimmicks. But that final boss, man, it was an enormous pain. I don't know if they made it brutal just to be brutal, or if it's because I didn't feel like learning the ins and outs of the upgrade, but that crap took me over an hour. Doom for the 32X. Yes, I beat two separate versions of the same game in the same year. What can I say? I like Doom. Sure, it's missing levels, it has a drab color palette, it horizontally stretches the pixels, and it doesn't let you strafe and turn at the same time, but it actually runs well enough to not have a 5-second input delay, and that alone makes this version a full tier above 3DO. Also, I didn't mention the universally mocked music because I think a lot of it works well with the setting. It makes it creepier. But yes, the 3DO soundtrack is actually good as standalone music. God of War is a hyper-violent hack-and-slash beat-em-up, and it's a lot of fun. When you're beating people up, that is. Like many hack-and-slashes, it also has puzzles spread across, and I'm already bad at video game puzzles, so whenever I can't figure one out, I look it up, and most of the time it's 100% my fault and I feel really stupid, but not here. Quite a few of these have ridiculous expectations of what they expect you to figure out. Still a good game, though. Zuma's Revenge for the Xbox 360 takes the simplistic PC original and makes it more console-gamey, with boss battles, character upgrades, and different gameplay styles. There's still really not much to it, but I love Zuma. I don't have to explain myself. This is my list. Gun is an open-world shooter in the Western setting, long before Red Dead Redemption popularized it within the genre. The game has good controls, decent variety in ways that make sense given the setting, and I even enjoyed the story for what it was. The game is weirdly short for a 7th generation blockbuster, only being about a few hours, but that made me realize that not all open-world games need to be long. A short game a lot of the time can save it from overstaying its welcome, and it leaves you with a microwavable sausage, egg, and cheese on a croissant taste in your mouth. Meaning good. I don't care if you disagree, I'm right. Every generation of Nintendo consoles has had the Mario game. Every generation except the Wii U, which was insane for Nintendo to skip out on. So that helped make the next generation's Mario Odyssey even bigger than it would be in general. I personally didn't enjoy it quite as much as most others, but that could just be because I stopped playing it after the credits rolled. Nintendo did this thing where they made the game fairly easy all the way through to give it a broad appeal, and then only after the credits are done rolling, you unlock a plethora of new missions in each level for the pros. I never came back to it because I already beat it, and I have to beat every game I own. That's one check mark off the list. Next. Super Mario World is without a doubt the Mario game for the Super Nintendo. I always loved this game. Growing up, I would play until I got past the second castle and stop there because I sucked, but I'd do that again and again because I loved the hell out of that first quarter. But now that I've actually beat it, I love it a lot less. Still good, but the familiarity of those first dozen levels aren't in the rest, and it would probably take me beating the entire game the same amount of times I replayed those first two castles for me to have the same love. And as you know already, replaying games is not in my schedule. The last generation Doom games are without the same doubt that said Mario's Time Machine was the Mario game, the greatest shooters of all time. But since they're both so amazing, which one do I choose? I beat the first one first, thankfully, because afterwards I've heard that it's hard to come back to it after getting used to the lightning fast action of Eternal, but since I haven't, I still remember it as being close to a masterpiece. And just like movies, the ending is very important due to the game leaving you with it, and Doom Eternal's only major flaw just so happens to be the final boss. It's so long and boring, and I hate it.
Doom.